It's good bro, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy. Back from Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Updates, the show where I update my main and test decks for you on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. That deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. So I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider doing all that YouTube stuff. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're covering a deck that is newer to my deck box compared to some of the other ones, but it's a deck I've really loved, and it's a deck I've had a ton of fun with. That's Ureni of the Unwritten. My love for Team of Dragons did kind of start with Miram, but at the time when I played Miram in my playgroup, the deck was just not balanced for what the table wanted and needed. And so I put that deck away, and when I started going back to Tarkir, I was like, oh, maybe they'll give me some Team of Dragon love. Maybe it'll be something I can come back to, try a different commander. And the second I read Ureni the Unwritten, I knew it was going to be the choice. I knew it was not going to be weak. It's a very strong deck. But I was like, okay, let's do this. I think this is more fun. And, you get to play dragons like Miram in there and make them to great effect. Ureni is a 7-mana Teamer Spirit Dragon Flying Trample. And whenever Ureni comes in or attacks, we're going to look at the top 8, put a dragon from among them on the battlefield, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I think Ureni does what Teamer Dragons wants to do, right? We're very good at ramping up to 7s. We're going to be pretty good at getting up to Ureni's cost. And then we're going to just start trying to cheat in dragons. And this is useful for 2 reasons. One, we have so many ways to give them haste, and we have a ton of effects that care about them entering. So there's a lot of ways we can really pay off pretty much everything Ureni wants to do. We also have a bunch of ways to give Ureni haste, meaning that ideally we're getting Ureni in and attacking on the same turn, getting 2 triggers, right, on the same turn as we turn in towards our opponents. But I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos just a little bit early, for just $1 a month, consider checking that out down below. Well, okay, I think one of the first key things is to get up to 7 or reduce Ureni's cost down, right? And there's a lot of ways you can do this. Bloomvine Region is not a dragon I see a lot for its regular side. Bloomvine's a lot of times I see on its Omen side, basically becoming a copy of Cultivator Kadama's Reach that you get to use out of your hand, but it's also a dragon. Dragonlord's Servant and Dragon Speaker Shaman both coming out and reducing the cost of our dragon spells. Servants by 1, Shamans by 2. So that's pretty awesome, allowing that to get reduced down. Fanatic Aronis, a nice mana dork, just tapping for 1 green, but the key part is once you have a creature with power 4 or greater, it taps for 4 green, and almost every single one of our dragons is 3 or higher. Or 4 or higher. So Fanatic's always going to have a nice partner to get it up so it can tap for 4. Nogi and Sarkhan are both going to reduce the cost of our dragon spells. Nogi can become a dragon while it attacks if we have 3 other dragons. But Sarkhan is the one really cool one. So whenever a dragon comes in, we can have Sarkhan become a copy of it, except its name is Sarkhan, and it's a legendary destroyer type. Sarkhan is really great with Ureni because Ureni can come in, get its own trigger. Sarkhan then becomes a copy of Ureni. It doesn't get an enter trigger, right, because Sarkhan's already on the battlefield. But it would be able to attack and get Ureni's attack trigger, right? And it becomes that big 7/7 in the air, right? So Sarkhan's really great for that. Savala, of course, tapping for more mana the bigger our creatures are. We don't mind it not being a dragon because it does give us just so much great mana. Frontier Siege, right, giving us 2 green at each of our main faces. So 1, pre-combat and post-combat. And then Encroaching Dragonstorm kind of becomes a migration path, right? Comes in, gets 2 basic lands, put on the battlefield, tap. But whenever a dragon comes in, we can bring it back to our hand and do it again, which is kind of interesting. It's a pretty useful effect. Most of the time, you really want to see the Dragonstorm before we get dragons in, but it is nice to know that you could do it again eventually if you wanted to, although most of the time, once you get the main, process rolling, you don't need to ramp again. But it's good to know that you could, if you really were running dry, play a 4 or 5 mana dragon, right? Bounce it back to your hand and use it again next turn to ramp again. Well, who are dragons? And honestly, there's a lot of really great dragons you can choose. I tried my best to find dragons with great ETBs and just great overall value. Things like Ancient Copper Dragon getting you all those treasures. Treasures we'll talk about in a bit. Works into one of our main alternate win cons in the deck. Astral Dragon is a absolutely insane dragon, depending on what you have on the battlefield when it comes in. When it comes in, you get to create 2 copies of a non-creature permanent you control, and they become 3/3 dragons. Now, there's a lot of things you can copy, and we're going to go over specific targets for Astral Dragon later in the video, but I think the floor, right, is mana rocks, enchantments, buff enchantments. Those are the floor of Astral Dragon, and there's a whole lot higher of a ceiling, and we'll talk about that in a second. A Tarkar World Render giving all of our dragons double strike when they attack. What I love about a card like this is going to give a double strike to that dragon when it attacks. So unfortunately, if Ureni attacks and flips into Tarka, it's not as ideal because it won't get double strike. We're also pairing with dragons like Blast Furnace Hellkite that just gives all creatures attacking our opponents double strike. So even our opponents' creatures that attack other opponents get double strike. But again, this, though, off Ureni will give it double strike. Balefire Dragon, whenever it hits a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that player controls. So it could be a nice board wipe for us. And there have been a lot of situations where I've had somebody basically have to remove a Balefire Dragon to not wipe their board. Deceptive Frostkite comes in as a copy of any creature we control power 4 or greater, except it's a dragon. One of my favorite targets for Deceptive Frostkite is Ureni, although it will come in and obviously die to the legendary rule. The important thing is you'll still get the Ureni enter trigger, right? And then you get to go dig deep for another dragon. Hellkite Courser, probably one of the better dragons you can get, lower on the curve if you have it. When it comes in, you can put a commander we own from the command zone onto the battlefield. It gets haste and return it to the commands of the beginning end step. Note that the commander tax rule is depending on how many times you cast your commander out of the command zone, not how many times it leaves the command zone. So this won't actually incur you extra cost in your commander, but it basically will give you you're running onto the battlefield with haste, meaning you're guaranteed those 2 triggers that turn, right? And then Ureni's back so you can cast it again. Cloth is one of my favorite dragons. It was one of my favorite dragons in Miram, and it remains one of my favorite dragons in this deck. Whenever it attacks, you add X-Men in any combo of colors where X is the total power of attacking creatures. Now, you can only spend it to cast spells, but I mean, who doesn't love 10 or 12 mana used to cast other dragons, other things, and just put yourself into better situations? Laughless Dragon Queen, whenever another dragon comes in, you make a 5/5 dragon token. Note that it doesn't count tokens, so it's not like you go infinite with itself. But hey, those 5/5s matter, and for some of the other things we'll talk about that care about dragons entering, that will count. Miram says whenever a non-token dragon comes in, you make a copy of it, except if it's legendary, the copy isn't legendary. This is a huge deal. There are a lot of legendary dragons that we would love to make a copy of, starting with Ureni, right? But even something like Old Gnawbone beside it, or some of our other dragons. If you can see Miram early, maybe on the first or second trigger of Ureni, or even an opening hand, you're going to have a great time just causing absolute carnage on the board. One of the dragons we'll talk about that lead to some of our extra ways to deal out damage is Scourge of Valkis. It says whenever this creature or another dragon we control enters, it deals X damage to any target where X number of dragons we control. So this can hit creatures, this can hit players, this can hit a lot of things, and should either start peppering down our opponent's life totals, or we could remove key things potentially if we need to. Tear the Peaks, very similarly, whenever another creature comes in, this deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. This is another great one, especially on things like Laughless and then Udvara Dragon we'll talk about in the next slide, that are bringing in tokens, because the tokens will count for Tear the Peaks to start slinging out more damage. Third main dragon, cast creatures with power 4 or greater off the top of your library, and if you cast a creature spell this way, it gets haste. Awesome. This is great. There's a lot of dragons in our deck we'd love to get haste on, and since Ureni's whole thing can get its ability on attack, this is nice because then you could still get another dragon that way. Twin Flame Tyrant, doubling all the damage we would deal to an opponent or permanent opponent controls. Again, great. All of our dragons are pretty big to begin with, and this plus double strike can go a really long way. We're playing the main set Ureni, a big 8 mana 10/10. Whenever it comes in, you deal X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures or planeswalkers our opponents control, where X is the number of lands you control. It's not something that's as guaranteed for us all the time. We're probably going to only end up with 6 or 7 lands maximum, probably most of the time, when it's going to get cheated in with Ureni. But again, that's damage that is relevant. Take out your opponent's key creatures, get some things out of the way. Udvara Hellkite, whenever a dragon we control attacks, make that 6/6 dragon with flying. And then Wrathful Red Dragon, whenever a dragon we control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon. Again, nice way to really start pinging this damage out and hurting our opponents, right, for blocking our dragons or trying to remove our dragons with damage-based effects. Well, what can we do to add some big value? Because I think that's where the support pieces of the deck come in. Of course, you have Roaming Throne. doubling up all triggered abilities of dragons we control. Big thing to note that Roaming Throne is not a dragon in your library. It is just a dragon when it hits the battlefield and you choose dragons. So we can't cheat it in off Ureni, but I mean, so many of our dragons have triggered abilities that this is just going to be beautiful for us. Conjurer's Closet lets us blink a creature we control at the beginning of our end step. Again, whether you do this for Ureni to cheat in another dragon, or you do this for just any other dragon to trigger, one of our Scourge of Valkus / Tear the Peak styles effects. This is just really great. And again, peak when you can use that on Ureni. Same thing with Panharmonicon, just doubling up triggered abilities that would happen whenever a creature or artifact we control, enters. Again, great for Ureni, great for a lot of our other dragons that care about other dragons entering. And you can just start to see how these pieces are going to really work together for what we're trying to do. Agasol is one of our alternate win cons, paying 5 mana to untap all creatures we control and then have another combat after this main phase. We do have multiple dragons that produce mana, right? Gnawbone can make us treasures when our creatures hit. Savage Ventmaw crazed mana on attack. Where's I going to go? Copper Dragon can make treasures when it hits. So there's a couple dragons that work really well with Agasol, and we're one of those decks where if we can potentially take as many combats as we want, it's not very hard to end the game if we can get there. Dragon Tempest is the other kind of half of the Scourge of Valkus effect, but strictly better because it allows all of our creatures with flying to have haste when they enter until end of turn. And then whenever a dragon we control enters, it deals X damage to any target, X number of dragons we control. Dragon Tempest is probably my single favorite target for Astral Dragon if you can do it. That's 3 triggers of damage anytime a dragon comes in, which is huge, and it does not take very long for you to just dump dragons on your board and just nuke out the table with damage. Frostcliff Siege, most of the time we're going to pick the bottom one, giving all of our creatures +1/+0 trample and haste. But I actually have had games where I've had more than enough dragons, and I've just decided to, I'm going to go ahead and pick the top one to draw a couple cards every turn. But mainly we're choosing the bottom one to get that trample and haste. Same thing with Temur Ascendancy, just giving all of our creatures haste, but we do get to draw a card if a creature power 4 or greater enters, which is going to be almost every time off of Ureni's trigger and some of our other things. Rhythm of the Wild stops our creature spells from being countered, and then gives all of our non-token creatures Riot. That means they get their choice of either a counter or haste when they enter the battlefield, which again is very useful. And then Ureni, Arena of Glory, can tap for a red, or you can pay a red into it to exert it, meaning it doesn't untap during your next turn, to get double red and that creature gets haste. This is a very useful ability and have more than once allowed Ureni to come in with haste and just really propel me forward in value. But I've said it before on the show and I'll say it again, no deck's ever complete, although I think Ureni's been running really well and I've learned a lot of things. I think there's a couple things that I've still been looking to try to work back in. The first is something like Molten Echoes. I love Molten Echoes. You come in, you pick a creature type. Whenever a non-token creature of that type comes in, you get a copy of it that you get to use till end of turn and then it exiles. At minimum, you get a second Ureni. At maximum, you're getting a ton of triggers. I've just been trying to figure out how to work it in. I took an effect like Essence Flux out of the deck just to blink Ureni, and I think something like it could be brought back in to get a piece of value at the right time. I kind of cut it for the Closet because my thought was then, the Closet can do it every turn, right, as opposed to the Flux just doing it once. But I'm sure there's an argument for packing the deck with more things like Flux just to protect Ureni or something like that. But another card that I've really thought about that I love the idea of is Devastating Onslaught. So you just create X copies that are a copy of target artifact or creature, and they get haste until end of turn. It's tempting just to look at this and say you're only do this to Ureni, which is perfectly fine. You can, and you'd get all those ETB triggers, but my thought, right, is you think about this, if Astral Dragon's out, you can get copies of that, you're going to get its ETB, right? You can get ETBs like Tear of the Peaks or Scourge of Valkus. There's so many dragons in our deck that have great ETBs that, this seems really cool. I was really looking at Doppelgang as well. That's a triple X blue and a green spell. Lets you make X copies of any X target permanents. And I like the idea of it. The difference I think that you're going to run into with Doppelgang is it just costs way too much. For 2 copies of 2 things with Doppelgang, you're paying 8 mana. And for 2 copies of one thing with Devastating Onslaught, you're only paying 5 mana. So I think there's a difference, although those are the 2 spells that I'm looking at up that vein. And so I'm intrigued to see maybe if I can work one of the 2 of those in, plus the Molten Echoes. But let's do what we love to do on the channel the most and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest on our channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not just to show off all our best plays, but to get into our gameplay scenarios and kind of see what hands we'll be looking to keep and how we're going to set up. Love seeing a 4-lander, especially with a Mana Dorks or Mana Rock, some ramp, and then a way to give your board haste. This is a great hand. I think it's just going to come down to how we want to sequence which ramp we're going to use first. Herd Heirloom is certainly interesting, and I think it's well worth doing on turn 2, because otherwise we were just going to do nothing, right? Now the question is, Kadama's Reach versus, like Curse Mirror. Kadama's Reach ends up with 5 mana. We had an extra land in our hand. We'd have 6 mana next turn. We could do this, or we could do this into the Thundermane Dragon, right? So that does leave us a lot of options. I think I'm kind of thinking about that. And then I have a island in my hand, so we can go forest down and put a mountain in our hand. Then this turn, my thought is 1, 2, 3 for the Curse Mirror, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 for the Thundermane Dragon. Now we can look at the top card of our library at any time, and then remember we can cast creatures power 4 or greater off the top. But I don't think we need to, right? Because now we're going for Ureni, and we know it's on top, so we know Gnawbone's a legal target for Ureni when we cast it, right? You could also, now that I think about it, we could run Gnawbone off the top here if we really wanted to. We wouldn't. Ureni wouldn't attack this turn, right? But Gnawbone is, I would assume on turn 5, unless everybody has flyers, be basically guaranteed to hit an opponent, netting us 7 treasures, and then you'd be guaranteed to then still cast Ureni, right, and hit it into the thing. So I guess it would just come down to how much risk do you think you're at of your opponents to remove Gnawbone immediately? Like if I'm playing into all tap lands, I would probably just go Gnawbone, attack with both of them, net the 11 treasures, right? Because Thundermane's still able to attack, and then I'd probably go Panharmonicon into Ureni. Ureni comes in, goes off twice. Now I have a board full of dragons, and a board wipe is the only thing that's going to stop that from just getting way out of hand. So let's say we do that. We go that, we attack. We play the Panharmonicon. You play the Ureni. We're going to have Ureni go off twice. This is a hard draw because I love Astral Dragon, but like truthfully, the thing I'd want to copy with Astral Dragon is Panharmonicon, which could be potentially really dangerous, right, for the next one that goes off. So we'll put those back on bottom. Now, if anything comes in, it is just mega triggering. Remember, can't take Gnawbone. Okay, we do take that. I first thing I thought we were going to whiff. We do whiff every now and then. So we have a Bloom by Regent. Bloom by Regent's going to come in, and it's actually going to go off twice. So it's going to end up it's going to end up going off 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So it's going to net us 12 life because of all these Panharmonicons, right? And then now, again, the wipe's the only thing I'm really worried about at this point, because if not, you could get an island down, get this Teamer Ascendancy down just to draw you some cards, and then just get attacking, right? Ureni attacks. It's only going to go off once, right? Because it's not an ETB. It's an attack trigger. I think I like Inferno, but I guess, Lathliss isn't a bad option. The only thing I'm worried about Lathliss on is I could just go way too deep, because remember, Teamer Ascendancy doesn't say non-token. So if I have another dragon comes in, Lathliss is going to make a ton of tokens. My thought here is Inferno just to see what we get, right? Because it's going to come in, and I'm going to draw 4 cards right off the Teamer Ascendancy. My real thought here was, can I get into removal? Can I get into, protection? But I've got, 6 mana? So I could play the Dragon Tempest, and then I'm netting a ton of treasures from Gnawbone. And I think with the Tempest, we should be able to potentially nuke the table out, right? Because you pay the 2 for the Tempest. We're gonna use some of our treasures off of these things to play the Atarka. The Atarka is gonna have Dragon Tempest go off 4 times, right? Once by itself, and 3 because of the Panharmonicons, right? So you're getting a trigger of 7 damage 4 times. We're drawing 4 more cards. And because we have an arbitrarily probably large amount of treasures, we're probably going to have at least 20 treasures plus, unless somebody really had flying blockers. We still have the option to play off the top with Thundermane. We're going to start digging. We're gaining life off the Blue Vibe region. And I think as long as we can keep playing enough dragons, right, I think we're in great shape to probably just nuke the table. And if not, leave them really low, in the wake of all of our damage. Great upside there, but it goes to show you how some of that early ramp can really change the game. You know, Ureni coming down so early and getting in the red zone right away. We see the same thing here, but we see a Fanatic Aronis, which is pretty cool. Another one of those really great turn 2 plays, right? So we're not just taking, so if we have a 3-mana ramp spell, we're not just taking turn 1 and 2 completely off, right? We're really allowing it to get us going. Thinking Forest, and then we'll go Island to hand. So unfortunately now, no turn 4 Ureni, right? Nothing we can do about that there. But now you got 6 mana. I mean, you could technically go Inferno or Twin Flame Tyrant here. Inferno is haste. It can attack this turn. Twin Flame just sets up more damage next turn. I think I'll go the Inferno just in case I can maneuver Great Hinge somehow next turn. Well, I should be able to, right? Because it would only... Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. But play the Inferno. It can attack. Now, right, Fanatic's tapping for 4. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This would come down for 3, right? 7, minus 6 is 1, so 3 mana. And I've still got 7 left, but this adds 2 for 9. So my thought was Tempest into Ureni. The thought here is now I'm giving Ureni haste and I'm dealing the damage. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. So now Ureni comes in. It's going to end up dealing out 3. This is a really interesting choice. Do you roll the trigger again off of Frostkite for another big dragon? Or do you take, something like Cavern Horde or the Ventmaw? Right, because with even something like Ventmaw... Sorry, we also have the Henge trigger of Ureni coming in as well, drawing us a card. So you can see we've already got a couple nice triggers. I mean, Cavern Horde could be good if a player's, playing artifacts. He does a lot of that. Ventmaw would be really good if we'd, draw our way into Aggravated Assault, right? We got a lot of really great dragons. I'm going to go Cavern Horde. I think there's a lot of choices there. I really thought about the Frostkite. But again, counter their draw, right? We have the Tempest triggers off of, those 2 coming in. So 3 and then 4. And then Ureni attacks this turn. Sorry, we also gain 2 life off the Henge. Gainax is a great one. It's going to net us some treasure, right? And going to draw us a card off the Henge. And the damage. But remember, these both had haste because of the Tempest. Gainax would have haste, but we already declared the attacks with Ureni, right? So otherwise, I mean, we're in great shape. We're coming back to our turn. We pretty much had to have our opponents, right, nuke the board. Otherwise, this is just going to should be pretty nice. 3, 7, 9, 13. I thought as a Tarka plus Twin Flame, that's 7 plus 5 is 12. Because that's giving both of these haste, but everybody's going to have double strike, and they're going to deal twice the damage. I should just realize we're going to end up netting a couple treasures. So let's step this out. Atarka comes in, counter draw, haste damage, treasure off of Gainax. Twin Flame, counter draw, treasure, haste off of Gainax. So that was 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 4 mana left. Earthquake Dragon could come in for free or could come in for just 1 green. And this is assuming that Cavern Horde gave me no treasures last turn when it attacked. I'm just going off base minimums. I think it makes more sense to play the dragon because now you're going to have a trigger for 8 off the Tempest. It can attack this turn. You're drawing a card. We're going back down to just 1 treasure. But again, you're guaranteeing yourself more damage this turn. And it has double strike, right? And double the damage, right? So that, I imagine, would just probably be lethal. But again, it just goes to show you, why dragons can be such a dangerous archetype, right? When they're left alone to do these big things. Here we'll go playtest number 3. Keeping a 4-lander with Selvala, or 5-lander, sorry, with Selvala and Temur Ascendancy. Great. We love to see it. Selvala is just one of those creatures that we love to see. Mana gets better and better over the courses of turns. And we luck out. I think we just pretty much go for that Herd Heirloom. Now, we could have changed our choice here knowing we had the Herd Heirloom. Maybe you go like that. This in, go for Selvala. And again, we get the any mana from the heirloom, right, for a creature, so that's really nice. So this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to cast a creature, 5 otherwise. If I'd done this, this was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 would give it haste, right? I think it's still Wrathful. Wrathful probably draws us. And then we don't get to attack, but I think that's okay. Because I think at the end of the day, it's still all about getting Ureni down this turn. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We could make it 10 in Arena of Glory with haste, right? My thought is 3, make a copy of Wrathful Red with Mirror just to end a turn. 2, 3, 4, 5. We would need it. We would need it to be a dork, right, if we want to do that. Because this is, well, no, this is 5, 6, 7, and then, yeah, 3. So we can make a copy of Wrathful till end of turn, have Ureni come in with haste because of the arena. So the arena is going to stay exerted. Either Balfour or Lathlas. I think it's Lathlas with some of the things we have coming. Ureni would have probably drawn us a card off of Selvala for being the highest power on the field, which we probably should have done before which would have done now that after we looked. So again, attack as it has haste because of its ability, and then this has haste. So we're gonna get another trigger this turn off of Ureni. I still think it's Ventmaw. I think we still have a better chance of rocking into something. And then now it's just going to come down to our opponents, having to deal with the board, because otherwise you've just slam dunked a bunch of dragons on the battlefield. Trying to think, would I go 3 for Team Ascendancy? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 7. So that's enough for Astral. Astral comes in with haste. I'm gonna make a copy of Teamer Ascendancy, I think. What draws me 1. Right? And then it coming in makes a 5/5 dragon off of Lathlas, which is gonna draw me 3 more, right? And then I think the hope is, right, you're just gonna run through combat. We either need to draw into Agasol or truthfully probably just keep running the board over, go for something that, gives us double strike should be pretty good as well. Because, you attack with her, everything goes to attack. Miram is a great choice. Oh, so is Copper Dragon, so is Bahamut. My gut says it's Miram. It just gives us more dragon enters, which I think just means more card draw, right? That draws us 3. Another dragon. And then, there's your big damages. We just pitch down to hand size. And I think, you get 6 more mana off of the Ventmaw. You could play the Horde just to get some extra mana in. Well, truthfully, I think we're just in great shape. You may not have seen the Agasol, but that's so much power in dragons. And then all you have to do is hit another dragon on the battlefield, draw some more. You're getting copies of them. Everything that came in has haste, right? And I think we're just, in good shape overall there. This deck's just one of those decks where can get into a real headache quickly and just how well it does what it wants. One last playtest here, keeping a 3-lander. Got multiple 2-mana ramp spells, which is great. And we get Sarkin, which is interesting. Red here, so it turns on the ability for that to tap for either. And we'll go for Ketria. Now, this is I think, where this choice gets kind of interesting. Sarkin, I think, makes sense. It just kind of feels weird, right? Because then next turn we'd only have 6, but I guess you could get down something like Terror of the Peaks, right? I think you could still get Tear the Peaks down, and then we reduce for next turn, right? Because now it's reduced by 3. So it's just 2 mana. And then now, right, the Sarkin get attacking as a copy of Terror, and because it's a copy of, well, it's on Enters, isn't it? So this terror won't see this terror enter, but you're still dealing out. You won't get to deal out damage there, but now we have enough mana to cast Ureni. Right, and it's that nice thing where Sarkhan becomes a copy of Ureni. So you're getting 2 triggers. You're getting a trigger here for 7. Sarkhan becomes a copy of Ureni. Again, so now it can attack and get that attack Ureni trigger. Ooh, Goldspan could be fun, but I kind of like Savage considering how many dragons there are in our hand. Note if we wanted to jump ship, we could have Sarkhan become a copy of Savage Vent Multi in turn to get us more mana, but I still think it makes sense to keep it as Ureni to get the second trigger this turn on attack. That'll deal out 4 damage, and then that'll go ahead and attack. That seems fun because we could put down one of these dragons for free. Well, wait a second. Can it become a copy of? Well, okay, so it would be the equal to its power, which would be 7 because it's Ureni, which would actually let us hit like copper. Whereas if we make it become a copy of Brood, we could only put down Valkis, right? So I think that makes more sense. Again, more damage off of that. We get 6 mana off of the Vent Maw. We could crack a 3 visits, and I honestly still think we'd have mana to play. I still think we'd have mana to play Valkis. But either way, I think we kind of show what we're doing there. But let me know, what do you think of Ureni down in the comment section below? I'll admit I don't think I've played this deck enough. It's one of those ones I want to start playing more. It's a deck I really enjoy. I've kind of enjoyed getting myself back into Dragons, and just really hoping the deck can continue to be what I want to play. But I'd love to know, what do you think of Ureni down in the comment section below? And we'll catch you on the next one.